One of the tasks that we often need to do as computer programmers is import and export data. And often we need to transfer data from one application to another, like from Excel to Python, or from the web to Excel. And probably the most common file format to do that is called the CSV file. It stands for comma separated value. And the files that result are simple, human-readable lines with fields separated by commas. You've probably seen these files using Microsoft Excel. Sometimes you open a file and Excel asks you if you want to convert it from a CSV file to an Excel spreadsheet. Or when you save files from Excel, you always have the option to save them as CSV files so that you can export them to another application. Today we'll learn how to read and write these types of files using Python. I have a list of lists here. Each item of the list contains 2 strings. The first one is a type of animal, and the second one is the class that that animal belongs to. We'd like to take this list and export it to a file so we could open it maybe in Excel. So let's try. The first thing we need to do is open a file, and we'll just use the open keyword. It's built into Python, and the first parameter we need is the name of the file we want to open. We'll just call it myfile.csv for comma separated value. The second parameter identifies whether we're going to be reading or writing from the file, and there are actually a lot of options, but we're just going to choose the W option, which will create a brand new file for writing. If a file called myfile.csv already exists, the W option will basically erase it and start over. And then we're going to add one more parameter, the newline parameter, and we're going to specify newline equals the empty string. This is important because OS, Windows, and Linux handle files in different ways, and we want to make sure that we're reading and saving our files in a way that they can be picked up again on any platform. When we use the open keyword, it returns an object that's called a file handle, and we'll just assign this result to the name file. So once I've got a file open, I need to be able to write to it, and in order to do that we need a different kind of object called a CSV writer. The CSV writer is already included in your Python implementation, but we have to import it. And the method we want to call is called writer. The parameter that we pass to it is the handle that we used when we opened the file. So we'll just say file. And again, we want to save the result to a variable name. We'll call this CSV writer. The writer object makes it very easy to export this list of lists to a CSV file. We can simply say CSV writer.writeRows, and then the iterable that we're going to use to write, so animal classes. If I just wanted to write one row, I could use writeRow instead of writeRows. What this method will do is go through animal classes, and for each item in the list, it will write one line to the file. Now each item is a sublist with different items in it, so it's going to write each string to the file separated by a comma. Let's just see how that works. Before we run this, there's one last step we need to take care of, and that's closing the file. When you open a file, you need to close it. We'll see a shortcut for that later, but let's run this. We didn't get any interesting output in the run window, but let's see if we created this file, myfile. I see this in my list of files. Open it up, and there we go. For each line in animal classes, the first line was frog, amphibian, we have one line in myfile. Now if we wanted to, we could open up this file in Excel, and we would see each of these strings occupy one cell in a spreadsheet. But instead, we'd like to read this file back into a Python program. Let's create another program just to prove that we're actually reading from the file. The process for reading a file is similar to the process for writing. We still need to import CSV. We need to create a file handler using the open command. We use the same file name, but this time we're going to read the file, so we're going to put R instead of W. And again, we'll include the newline parameter as an empty string. We'll open a CSV reader and use the file handle as the parameter. The reader is an iterable, so we can loop through it in a for loop. Let's run this one. There, we got our list back. Almost. So notice that each line came back as a list. CSV Reader automatically separated the items out by looking at the commas. Incidentally, if we wanted to use a different separator, we would use the delimiter keyword. So if we wanted a semicolon, for instance, as a separator, we could do that. We can do that with both the reader and the writer. But we're going to stick with commas. Perhaps we'd like to completely restore our original list, and we could do that with a list comprehension. Remember, the list comprehension has three pieces, has an item, a loop, and an iterable. And each item is going to be a list, so what we should end up with is a list of lists. We'll print it out to make sure. And let's run this. Perfect. Now, we didn't close this file, which is bad practice, and it's easy to forget to close a file after you're done with it. So there's a keyword called with that will allow us to use a block and have the file handle only open inside that block. Let's restructure this just a little bit. So instead of saying file equals open, we'll say with open as file. We have to put a colon here because we're expecting a block. We'll indent all of this. And now the file handle file is only valid inside this block. Once we complete the block, Python will automatically close the file and discard the handle. We can use this both with reading and with writing. Let's go back to our writer and look at one more thing. Again, I'm going to rewrite this to use the with block. So I no longer need my file.close. We'll run this to make sure it still works. And let's look at my file. So at this point we have 7 lines, in total representing our list of lists. And every time we run this program, the file is cleared and recreated. But what if we wanted to add more to it? What if we just wanted to continue where we left off? We can change the W flag to an A for append instead of write. We'll run this again, take a look at my file, and now we have 2 copies. Of course, we might have appended brand new information to the end of the file. There are a bunch of other flags that you can use, and you can explore this on the Python docs, and also a bunch more methods in the CSV class. So take a look at the docs if you want to know more. Let's come back to the reader for a second, and imagine that instead of a list, we actually wanted to make a dictionary here. That's a little harder. We can't just change this to a dictionary comprehension. But remembering that row is a list, we can break row out into its individual components. So we can access the 0 item in the list and item 1, setting up the first item as the dictionary key and the second item as the value. Let's not call this my list. Is that we can do anything with the items of the list. We could convert some of them to integers if they happen to be integers. We could do math on the list. We could discard some of the items in the list, whatever we like. The CSV reader and writer and the other objects in the CSV module have a lot more capabilities, and I hope you'll go to the Python docs and take a look at everything they can do.